Our firm is really happy to be back with you again. I think we initially talked with you about cybersecurity last September or October. There have been a lot of changes since then. I'm going to share my screen out so that you can see our slide deck. But if you have any questions as we're moving through, please go ahead and use the chat feature so I make sure that we don't miss anything and we can get your questions answered as we move through. So let's get our slides up. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see our title slide, Cybersecurity 2020. First and foremost, we have to make sure that we give you the disclaimers. Oh, no, hold on. I am not having success here, Dawn. Oh.
Which one did you share?
Well, now it's gone all together.
Uh-oh. Do we freeze?
I'm not sure what happened, but hold on just a second. I'm sorry about that. Presentations, GSAR. Let's try this again, because that's the one that I want to share. Let's try this again. But I can't get to it.
So close this down.
Yep.
To there. Now go to Zoom.
Zoom. Share my screen.
Share your screen. Share it and then start it.
Share it.
And now start it.
And now start it.
And then start from the beginning.
How's that? All right. Can everyone? Are we good? Sue, can everyone see the cybersecurity slides?
They can see it, but I know that you're on presenter view, so they can see your next slide and notes as well. So however you had it before, I think if you just do display settings there, I mean, that's not a terrible thing, but they're seeing both the slide that you're talking about and your next slide.
Okay.
Now share again. Share screen.
Share screen.
Now just share that.
Share that.
Share.
Okay. How's that?
That's excellent.
Okay. Boy, sorry about that.
No, don't be sorry. We are all still learning.
Oh, all right. Okay. So as I was saying, what I need to make sure that we move into first is our disclaimers about the fact that this presentation is not intended to be legal advice. It is for information only. It could be considered attorney advertising. You should not rely on this as legal advice. If you have specific questions with respect to anything that we cover here, you want to make sure that you contact an attorney to discuss your specific situation. So first and foremost, why does this cybersecurity issue continue to evolve? And I think everyone can agree that between changes in regulatory laws, which we're going to talk about, and COVID, this is definitely an issue that is evolving almost day to day. Cybercrime is continuing to rise at a much faster rate than the security industry can respond to it. According to McAfee's 2018 Economic Impact of Cybercrime study, 780,000 records per day were being lost then to malicious activity. So if that was 2018, think about what that could look like in 2020. Email vulnerability for companies continues to be prominent. Email is, I think, the single biggest vulnerability that businesses have, small and large businesses. According to Verizon's 2018 data breach investigation report, 30% of all phishing emails are opened. 30% may not seem like a lot, but when you think about the amount of publicity about email phishing and email vulnerability, combined with the amount of training that most companies are doing on this topic, 30% is a big number. And the unfortunate reality is it takes one phishing email to be opened to have your entire network held hostage by ransomware, and that becomes a very, very expensive proposition. One of the other interesting statistics that we came across recently, over 24,000 mobile apps are blocked on a daily basis by your phone providers, either Apple or Google Play, because those mobile apps are sharing phone numbers, they're sharing your location, they're sharing bank account information, they're sharing things that you don't necessarily want to share because of vulnerabilities in their design. So when you couple the fact that we have become such a mobile society and we're working from devices and locations that we've never worked from before, that cybersecurity issue and the cyber crime danger just continues to evolve at a pace that the industry cannot simply keep up with. So protected information is something that we talk a lot about. What is protected information? The reality is that from a regulatory perspective, it can be frustrating, it can be confusing, and it again falls into that category of ever evolving when you talk about how to define protected information. Sometimes, oftentimes, it depends on who's writing the definition. We've given you several examples here of regulatory requirements that are supposed to be followed as it pertains to cybersecurity. Each one of these rules have different definitions of protected information. There may be similarities, but each one contains different language on how that protected information is defined. So, where do you start? The easiest place to start is to break it down. Protected information is generally going to equate to personally identifiable information. That's going to include things like social security numbers, bank account information, dates of birth, passport numbers, gender, credit card information, addresses, driver's license numbers, email addresses, sometimes race. And really, you have to be thinking about this protected information in terms of both individual pieces of data, data sets, and data formats. So data sets could include dates of birth and credit card information. That's a data set that could, in the wrong hands, become dangerous to have out there. Data formats will include things like emails, email attachments, forwarded voicemail messages containing personally identifiable information. So you always have to be very, very careful about the information that you're transmitting, the format that you're transmitting it in, as well as the type of information that you are transmitting together. One of the things that I know we spent a lot of time focusing on when we were with you back in September had to do with transmitting real estate contract-related information and transmitting that via email. And that's something that we see in our setting quite a bit. But when you are forwarding real estate contracts with copies of closing checks and possibly, a scan of a driver's license number, or even a driver's license number included in an email if it's not a picture of that driver's license number, that's a data set and format that really needs to be sent in some sort of protected, encrypted type of communication. It's not something that you want to just forward without sending it via encryption. I'm going to let Dawn jump in and talk with you a little bit about the SHIELD Act and some other New York State regulations.
So good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all well. I'm going to talk about sort of the boring legal stuff, just so that everybody is on the same page, because when Stacy gets a little bit further on, she's going to talk about what to do in the event of a breach. And one of the first questions is, what does breach mean? And it means that in some way certain information has been compromised. So originally New York had a different data protection law. The SHIELD Act was signed into law in 2019 and became effective earlier this year in March for the most part. And that really broadened the definition of private information or protected information to include biometric information. So if you in any way keep face scans of people or fingerprints of people or any other biometric information, maybe weights or other things, it's included in the protection. Somebody's username or their email address in combination with a password or security questions and answers. So anything that would allow somebody to access somebody's computer system or allow somebody to access the the email of another person together is going to be a data set that is covered by the SHIELD Act. And then account numbers of credit card numbers, those were always protected, but they were only protected in the past if you also disclosed the CVV, the security code on the back. Now they are protected even without a security code because, of course, we all know they can be used without a security code. So those are the things that were added to the law. What was previously in the law were things like Social Security numbers, credit cards in conjunction with a security code, and I think there was, you know, somebody's personal, if you had a set that included Social Security number, name, and address, that was also a breach. The other thing the SHIELD Act did that changed the way data breaches are handled in New York is it expanded the definition of the word breach. In the past, you only had a breach if something was actually taken. And the issue with that was primarily with ransomware. Ransomware is a program where a hacker hacks a system, takes a very small subset of data, but really just locks your entire system down. It's very devastating to businesses. About something like 50% of small businesses that are hit with a ransomware attack never recover. So what New York said is, well, it's not really fair to say it only applies, a breach is only when that information is taken, because we think a breach is also when it's accessed, which would be a ransomware attack. It also expanded the territorial scope. So previously, New York's law only applied to businesses owned and operated in New York. Now it applies to anyone who has the information of a New York resident. That becomes really important for you, probably you're all New York businesses, but please keep in mind there are other states' statutes that also apply to their residences, most notably California's, and it has a whole host of requirements for people who have the data of anyone who resides in California. So under the Act, there is also a security breach and notification. There has always been, but the SHIELD Act expanded that breach law to include all of those extra things that you now have to give notice for if you have a breach under the Act. So it requires either written notice to the person, electronic notice to the person, or in some cases you can use telephone. And you have to give them notice if, and this applies, I'm just going to go back. Actually, I'm not. That notice requirement applies regardless of the number of records that are compromised if they contain any of those things we talked about being private information under the Act. If you have more than 5,000 New York residents who are involved in your breach, then you must also provide the notice to consumer reporting agencies and to the Attorney General's office. I'm going to turn it back over to Stacy, who's going to go over the Part 500 rules for those in banking, insurance, financial services, and yes, unfortunately, that includes real estate sometimes.
So the Department of Financial Services Part 500 rules is something that we spent quite a bit of time on back in September as well, but it is definitely worth spending some more time on. For those of you that are not familiar with the DFS Part 500 rules, those rules are designed to cover any person or entity that is operating under the banking law, the insurance law, or the financial services law. And that hits most of the major parts of real estate for sure. We even are covered as a law firm under the Department of Financial Services Part 500 rules because we hold a title insurance agent's license, and you will find that to be the case with any law firm that you're dealing with that has a New York State Title Insurance agent's license. So Part 500 rules probably are permeating a significant portion of your day-to-day work. So what is the Part 500 rules, what do those say? The Part 500 rules really give covered entities a roadmap that they are required to follow and certify back to the Department of Financial Services on an annual basis with respect to the cybersecurity safeguards that they are utilizing. So the Part 500 rules tell us that we are required to conduct annual risk assessments within our own network, that we are required to go out and have annual penetration testing performed on our network. We have to maintain audit trails of everything that we do on our network, of all of the activity. We have to document access privileges to all of our company systems. We have to make sure that we are managing and documenting third-party service providers and their security policies. Third-party service providers we'll talk about as we get a little bit further along, but if you are utilizing outside technical support vendors, or you are utilizing certain software products that qualify as a third-party service provider, you're going to have to be on top of those organizations' security policies as well. The Part 500 rules give us a roadmap for ongoing training and monitoring within our own network. They give us the requirement for utilizing encryption for that non-public protected information. They require us to make sure that we have an incident response plan and that we are constantly evolving with that and testing that incident response plan. Again, it requires that we give annual notice back to the Department of Financial Services every year, and we're required to give notice of a cybersecurity incident within 72 hours of that incident. So there's a lot there under the Part 500 rules. Those rules are certainly designed to safeguard data, but it also is, it can be an overwhelming task if you don't know where to start or if you're not getting the right guidance on cybersecurity for a business. I mean, these rules dictate a lot of the discussion that I have with Dawn and some of her partners and our technology department on a regular basis as we are constantly evaluating the audits that we're doing on our network, the activities of our employees and our attorneys, those types of things. So the other one that is a biggie is the FTC safeguards rule. The FTC safeguards rule requires financial institutions that are under the FTC jurisdiction to have measures in place to keep consumer information secure. As far as how the FTC is defining financial institutions, there's some language in there that indicates that you're looking at companies that offer financial products or services to individuals, such as loans, financial or investment advice, or insurance. You're looking at things like non-bank mortgage lenders, banks, of course. You're looking at loan brokers, real estate appraisers, real estate settlement service providers, certain financial or investment advisors, tax return preparers. There's a pretty big group that fall under that FTC safeguards rule that give them the obligation to make sure that they are protecting that data. GDPR is another one that we want to make sure that we touch on, the General Data Protection Regulation. The European Commission started dealing with trying to define the GDPR back in January of 2012 as a major data protection reform for the European Union. They finally reached an agreement in 2016 with respect to what that data reform would look like and how they would enforce it. Effectively, it was a new set of rules that is designed to give EU citizens more control over their personal data. I think within the United States, the closest that you're going to come to GDPR right now is the California Data Protection Act, the CCPA, which pretty closely mirrors the GDPR. But I would not be surprised at all to see other states heading that way. So I think the goal for a lot of governmental entities is to tighten up our own personal rights with respect to how our personal data is handled and used. The penalties, we always like to make sure that we're mentioning the penalties for non-compliance, because some of these can be very hefty. If you're looking at the FTC safeguards rule, for instance, you could be looking at fines of up to $100,000 per violation. On the New York State SHIELD Act, you're looking at fines of up to $5,000 per violation. The New York State Information and Security Breach Notification Act carries its own fines of $5,000 to $10,000 per instance of disclosure. The New York State Department of Financial Services doesn't even apply a set dollar figure to violations of the Part 500 rules. They generally tend to wait until they finish their company-wide audit before they come down with their monetary penalties, and GDPR has, fines built in that can range from 10 million euros on up. So that, that can be pretty substantial as well as far as the penalties for non-compliance go. I'm going to jump from the regulatory side of things to something that I think we've all had to deal with quite a bit, especially in the last couple of months. I know that I have spent a fair amount of time dealing with this myself, and I think we have spent a significant amount of time dealing with this for our clients. And that's dangers that employers and companies have uncovered in the remote workforce that really presented themselves during COVID. When we were forced to close our offices and send everybody home to work, it dragged a lot of previously undiscovered, or in some cases unthought of, dangers right out into the harsh light of day. I think one of the biggest is a lot of businesses discovered that they had inadequate business response plans for these types of scenarios. They were not prepared for their workforce to work from home from a cybersecurity perspective and all that entailed. They had not planned at all for either bring your own device scenarios, or if they were going to be supplying company or business-owned devices to their personnel. And those are all things that we are now starting to see people go back and edit into their business incident response plans so that they're ready next time, or they're prepared and they have that better documented and better planned for. One of the other issues that presented itself very quickly are for those people that did try to work within bring your own device policies, they very quickly discovered that their employees were trying to work on devices from home, work from home networks that were not being patched or were not up to date or were not compatible with workplace software. Many businesses just found that they had no knowledge whatsoever of at-home networks and devices that their employees were trying to work on. And that really required that they slow down. They were not as productive as maybe they could have been or certainly wanted to be on the front end of the COVID shutdown, because they were playing catch up, trying to figure out what devices people did have at home, what specifications people had on work-from-home networks, to make sure that cybersecurity rules were still being followed and that the safeguards were still in place. A lot of businesses also discovered that their workers were just untrained for work-from-home cybersecurity scenarios. Companies that had good IT teams were able to get their workers up and running fairly quickly, but there was a lot of worker frustration, there was a lot of business frustration, there was a lot of lost productivity, and there were a lot of cybersecurity issues because workers were untrained for that work from home scenario. And we know, we've dealt with this with our clients, and, I think most businesses have seen this in their own networks. There was a significant increase in hacking attempts, in ransomware attacks, and in email phishing schemes once that workforce, who was not necessarily well prepared, started to work from home. So those were some of the big dangers that were uncovered in that remote workforce during COVID. Other things on the fringe, like telecommuting policies, not necessarily in place. Those are all issues that businesses were facing as their workforces were trying to figure out how to work effectively from home. And I am going to hand this off back to Dawn for social media safety.
So I just want to add just a couple of dangers that we also uncovered for really small businesses, which I know many of you are on the smaller side. One of the major ones we discovered was that a lot of times you're relying on outside tech support, be that the computer guy down the corner or somebody with, purple computer hats or whatever they're called these days. And a lot of them were not adequately patching their portals into your smaller business's equipment. And so something I would encourage you to do is to have that conversation with any tech support company you use, saying, what do you do, how often do you patch and update, what access do you have to my system, and if I go home, does that access change? Do you have a different access when I'm working on a different computer than you do when I'm working on this computer we've talked about? Because we saw a lot of ransomware attacks. We've probably seen double the ransomware attacks that we've seen ever before. And many of them were issued at smaller businesses than we've ever seen before. Usually those were things aimed at Sony or IBM or places like that, and now they're aiming them at smaller and smaller companies, and it's really very expensive to recover from that. So now I'm going to talk about social media just a little bit, and I talked about it last time too. Some tips again. Make sure you're understanding your social media privacy settings. Facebook just updated everything in the last month, and how they are allowing you to share and what you're sharing and where it's going has all changed again. So there's a tutorial you can walk through with them to see if you have the privacy settings you intend, but make sure you're doing that. Do not have any unattended accounts. I told my personal story last time about my account being hacked when I was unavailable in a national park, and I would tell you that I have a very similar story this time. My phone became disabled, and that's primarily where I check my Facebook. Well, hackers must scan our Facebook pages and notice that it wasn't being used on any regular basis, and so several people started emailing me privately saying, hey, I got a note from you on the instant messenger that I'm pretty sure isn't you. And in fact, it was not me. So you need to be very careful if you're going to have any kind of social media pages. Make sure they're monitored on a regular basis. If you are in an industry that has rules, make sure you know those rules. Things like insurance, you have to be careful about what you can post online. Remember the rule, once posted, always posted. I think we've gotten used to that now. Twitter, people are constantly trying to delete their posts. I guarantee you somebody has already screenshot your post, so please be careful what you post online. If you have employees, make sure they understand the rules that you expect of them for posting. In my business, that means we don't post anything about clients. Even if they've annoyed you all day and you want to vent, you can't post anything that would identify the client. You have similar rules that you want your employees to understand. I am always telling people, post travel pics at your peril. I understand it's fun to share them, but unless your house is being watched while you're away or your business is being watched if you've closed it, you are really giving thieves the opportunity to see that you're gone. Now, if you've got great privacy settings and you're only posting to a group of people, you may well be okay, but but make sure you've set it so that that picture can't be shared by somebody else. If something seems fishy, verify it. Again, you know, Messenger, I probably get at least once a month a request for money from a friend that I know is not real. Make sure you're verifying anything you get through Messenger. And then understand imposter accounts, phishing. These are accounts that people use to either get money from you, like the Messenger shot you might be getting, or a fake account that purports to be so-and-so's account, and in fact it's not. So if you are on social media, you really do need to protect yourself and think about how you are going to protect yourself going forward. And I am now going to let Stacy talk about policies.
So smart cybersecurity policies. This is the groundwork for everything that follows. If you've got smart cybersecurity policies in place, then you have your roadmap for what to do when the unexpected happens. A lot of people take a look at it and, you know, we're all busy. And I think even more so now than we've ever been before, trying to keep up with everything. It's easy for getting a cybersecurity policy together to fall by the wayside. But this is really important because the time that you spend on the front end will be so beneficial to protecting your business on the back end. You will have the roadmap to answer the question, what do I do in the event of a breach? Your cybersecurity policies need to be designed to make sure that they are protecting the information that you want to keep secure, that your clients and your customers want to keep secure. And those may be different types of information. So you want to make sure, as you are looking at your cybersecurity policies, that you are protecting all of that information that is important to your business and to your clients. Your policies, your cybersecurity policies should, again, be that roadmap. They should be establishing policies and procedures that all of your organizational personnel, no matter how large or small your business, are being required to follow. You also want to make absolutely certain that within your cybersecurity policies, you have a cybersecurity program, a cyber threat and data breach response protocol, and an inadvertent disclosure policy. And those are three very distinct subsections within a cybersecurity policy that you really want to think about. That cyber threat and data breach response protocol, for instance, is invaluable to me. Anytime that someone comes to me and says, I think I might have screwed up, what do? I pull that off the shelf. I literally pull that off the shelf and I walk through that process every single time. Inadvertent disclosure is almost the same thing. If someone comes to me and they say, look, I made a mistake, I sent this here, if you go to the inadvertent disclosure section, you know the rules, the steps that your business wants you to follow to make sure that you are addressing that accidental disclosure. So, you know, those three areas are pretty key in having a smart cybersecurity policy for your organization. Things to consider when you're putting together a cybersecurity policy. You have to make sure that you are defining protected information, whether that's protected health information or non-public information. You want to make sure that you put a definition in there of what your organization views as protected information. You really want to define for people acceptable use, but you also want to define unacceptable use. Our employees have access to almost an unlimited store of data. Tell them how to use it. Tell them how they're not allowed to use it. Make sure you're specifically covering the handling of email. Are you requiring people to send email encrypted? If you are, in what circumstances? Make sure that you're setting requirements for remote access, for mobile device connectivity, wireless communication, all of those types of things as well. Tell people how secure you want the passwords to be. Yeah, you know, as part of that, we also recommend to people when they should be changing their passwords. We require, you know, people to change their passwords within a set definition period of time. The more information you can give people to help them secure your data, the better off you're going to be in the long run when you need to start referring back to these policies. Make sure you're telling people, how do you go about getting software and getting it installed on your computers? How do you go about getting hardware, and how do you go about disposing of hardware? Those are all things that should be in your policy as well. You need to make sure that you have very set protocols for how those things are being acquired, how they're being installed, and how they're being disposed of as well. I referenced third-party service providers earlier, and I want to spend some more time here because there can be a lot of questions about who third-party service providers might be. And again, in each organization, it's going to be a little bit different. First and foremost, if you outsource your technical support, if they have access to your network or your computers, that's a third-party service provider, and you have an obligation to make sure that you know what their cybersecurity policies are as well. If you leverage cloud computing services, those could fall into the category of third-party service providers. So you want to understand what types of cybersecurity policies and protections they have. Specialized software maintenance portals. So a lot of organizations will use organization-specific software to perform certain tasks. And as part of their maintenance agreement with the software company, they have a portal that they can either leave open in certain circumstances or open upon request to that software company to perform maintenance on that software. That's going to be a third-party service provider that you have an obligation to understand what their policies are. Email platforms. You need to make sure that you're very familiar with the cybersecurity procedures and policies for Roadrunner, Yahoo, Gmail, AOL, all of those types of programs. Document sharing portals, Dropbox, things like that. If you're dealing with a law firm, they may be a third-party service provider for you, and you want to be familiar with what their cybersecurity procedures and policies are. Same thing for financial institutions and title companies. When you're exchanging that personal information, that non-public data, you need to know who's got access to it and then what their cybersecurity policies and procedures are, because it all becomes an extension of your obligation to protect that data. So the dreaded question, I think I've had a cyber breach. Now what do I do? The very first thing is to make sure that you stay calm and that you take the time to investigate thoroughly. People are always tempted to very quickly patch a hole so you can get back so you can get your business back up and running, but this could actually leave you vulnerable to another breach. So you want to be very thoughtful, very methodical. You want to refer back to your cybersecurity policy to give you the next steps in protecting your business when you've had a breach. That's the first thing that you want to do is you want to pick up your breach response protocol. You want to follow your state's reporting laws or the regulatory rules that you are required to follow given your industry. You're going to want to notify your customers as quickly as you can, depending on what those requirements are, because not following through on those regulatory reporting laws could subject you to some of those penalties and further legal troubles. And you want to give some serious consideration to whether you need to call in security or forensic experts to identify and fix the problem. When you reach the level of a cybersecurity breach, especially in a small business, you probably don't have the type of security and forensic expert on staff that's going to be able to fix the problem. It's probably going to require that you go out of house. So you want to be prepared for that. Your event response and your documentation will become extremely important in these situations. Again, being able to tell a regulatory agency like the Department of Financial Services everything that you've done, every step that you've taken from the moment that you were notified of a potential event will help you in the long run. So again, these are not the types of issues that you want to sweep under the rug. You want to immediately notify your IT department and or any outside consultant that you think you've had a security event. You want to begin documentation with some sort of incident response report immediately so that you are capturing all the contact information of the person who first notified you of a security incident, the time that an incident was first reported to you, a summary of the nature of the incident, including specifics about what was noticed that sort of supports the idea of a security event, any of the equipment that was involved, including where the equipment was located. So, you know, for anyone who is working out of multiple locations, knowing the equipment that you have and where it's located will be critical in these types of situations, and how your security event was detected. Who brought it to your attention? Was this found in a network audit? Was this something an employee noticed? You know, how is this something that a client brought to your attention? Knowing how these things were detected and being able to capture all of that information will definitely put you ahead of the curve in being able to resolve a cybersecurity event. You know, and again, I keep circling back to this, but if you have all of this documented, then you'll be able to circle back to your policy and know what the next steps in the road are. You'll have all of your information gathered so that you can then go ahead and move forward with resolving the incident. So, a lot of yep, go ahead. Dawn has something else. I'm going to go back. Hold on.
So I just want to give you one last thing that I think we don't put in our email or in our presentation, but has really become clear to us, and that's because it's not specific to breach response. But the issue that we are seeing more and more is because of the expense of backup data, people are not backing up their systems often. And so I'm going to give you a few examples of what I've seen this year, just real, actual cyber events that happened this year. One involved a very small business. The employer had one part-time employee, and it was the person themselves. They had an outside IT provider. That outside IT provider forgot to apply a patch, and through that portal to their system came a virus that shut them down. By the time the problem was discovered and we went through the process, we hired another outside consultant who tried to restore the data, but the reality was this person had not backed up data for 6 to 8 months. They lost everything in that time. That included all of their payment accounts, so they could not send out bills to customers they'd already provided services to because they didn't have their billing information. It included their appointment data, so they didn't know when they had appointments scheduled and when they didn't, which meant they could not schedule any other appointments. They lost all the contact information for their clients, so they could not follow up with clients on appointments or sales or anything else they had done. It was really devastating. They are still not recovered from this breach. At the same time, through the same IT consultant, another small business, they had 3 employees and the owner, had the exact same experience. They were shut down completely. However, he had backed up every 2 weeks, and so he only lost 2 weeks of data. The difference in how quickly he was able to recover and get back to work, 2 weeks versus 6 months of data, was amazing. Yes, he had a little bit of difficulty for a couple of weeks. It was a bumpy go, but he, for the most part, had his customers' information, was able to send out bills, able to apply collections, and talk to clients and keep that thing going. So I can't emphasize for you enough how important it is to back up your data. And now I tell stories on myself all the time. Check your phone. If you are using your phone for business, you need to make sure it's actually backing up somewhere. It turns out that with the latest update to iOS 13, Apple turned off automatic updates on phones. And so if you do not go into your system and turn it on, you are not backing up your phone anywhere. It's not going to the cloud, it's not going to your iTunes, it's not going to wherever. Now, Apple sells storage. There are storage systems that are cheaper. I'm not here to sell you a storage system, but I can tell you the most expensive storage system out there is going to be cheaper than losing everything you have on your phone. So, if I could just tell you one thing to do, it's to have a plan for how you're backing up your data and to implement that plan regularly, because I am seeing more and more breaches, more and more ransomware attacks of small businesses, and the reality is if you don't have a backup, you are likely to be shut down for weeks, if not months. All right.
All right. And so with that one, we've pretty much reached the end of our topics, but we want to make sure that we open it up to questions. So let me stop sharing my screen. There we go. And I don't know if we have any questions in the chat.
No
Okay.
questions in the chat.
I do see one. Our
Oh, you
automatic
do?
updates.
Oh, one
yeah,
just came
our
over.
automatic updates the same as updating your phone.
Yes. If you are getting automatic update, or if you're updating your phones, you plug it in and you go from whatever version internal operating to the next day, before you do that, first of all, back up your phone in case something goes wrong during the update. After that, you need to make sure it turns back on, and that it is continuing to update and it's backing up of your phone. And I know storage is an issue. Storage is expensive. Storage isn't as expensive as losing everything. And then there are companies out there that have online storage that is relatively cheap to buy. Apple's just not one of them, but you can back up your Apple to them.
Any other questions that anyone has?
Oh, I think if there aren't that many of you there. If you want to unmute yourself and ask the question,
sure.
if you can't type it in. No?
Okay.
Wow. You guys did a great job then.
Steve, can I ask you a quick
And
question?
Sure.
Steve Crosby from Pachano Real Estate. Quick question. I wasn't on the presentation that you guys did in the fall, and I don't want to bore all the other folks if they were, but if there's any quick highlights you guys would have about emailing transactions or things like that, just a couple. I don't know if there's a very short version. Again, I don't want to bore everybody.
No, I mean, really the key with the email, are you talking about, you're talking about specifically with the information that you're transmitting, for instance, on a real estate transaction?
Yeah, so like an attorney's office.
Yep. So I think the first and foremost that you want to do based on what we have seen on our end is you want to make absolutely certain that you are using an email service that has encryption. We always are nervous when we receive real estate contracts or information from personal email addresses as opposed to your corporate email address, because usually the corporate email address either is automatically encrypted or has the ability to send encrypted. But if you're transmitting contracts that contain names, addresses, if you're transmitting attachments that contain bank account numbers, dates of birth, those types, social security numbers, any of those types of personally identifiable information, those are things that you want to make 100% certain are being sent encrypted. I know that when we are sending that information back out or we are forwarding that information back on, we are utilizing a product that does encrypt the email, every product's different. I know that Google has a Google business.
Google has a Google business which encrypts. If you use Microsoft, it's just a click of a button. Microsoft encrypts. I don't know that Yahoo has one, but they do have Yahoo Business, and it may well encrypt as well. Usually just the free ones do not.
Right.
Unless you buy separate encryption software or use a separate program.
So I think the key, based on a lot of what we've seen in our own real estate practice, is if the email that you are sending contains personally identifiable information, the most safe way for you to transmit it is using an encrypted email service.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? Sure.
What about faxing?
Faxing is becoming much more popular with respect to sending this information.
That's what I heard.
It really is. You know, I think you need to keep in mind that a lot of companies don't have your traditional fax machines anymore. So it is always a good idea to let someone know you are sending them a fax. For instance, when you send a fax to this office, it actually comes in on a phone line and into an Outlook email box, and it gets translated immediately to email. But then it's on our system and it's encrypted. So I think the caveat with faxing is give someone a heads up that you're sending them the fax, but sending a traditional fax eliminates the encryption issues with emailing.
Yeah, faxes are automatically
Yep.
encrypted. The transmission's fully encrypted.
Any other
Anybody
questions?
else? No?
Okay.
Well, Stacy and Dawn, thank you so much. That was very informative. I got some good information on that, and I hope everyone else did. I don't know if there's anything else you want to say in closing?
No, I mean, we appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about it, and if there are any follow-up questions, Sue, you certainly have our contact information. You know, we'd be happy to follow up.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much for that. And thanks
Right.
to HH&K for being a sponsor.